All right, guys, I want to welcome everybody out to another Laidlaw's Harley-Davidson podcast. So the topic that we're going to be tackling today is one of kind of a style direction that we feel like Harley-Davidson has kind of been torn between, especially recently. And that is basically moving forward. Does Harley-Davidson take what they've notoriously done in the past and style their bikes very classic? Or do they restyle their bikes into a more modern looking motorcycle? Harley-Davidson has always been very well known for having a very classic appeal. Some people would describe it as like a modern motorcycle with a very classic look to it. And Harley-Davidson has done that very well. And I think that's largely a part of Harley-Davidson's success is their ability to make a very classic looking American motorcycle. However, in recent years, especially with the redesign of the Road Glide and the Street Glide, they took a very modern approach and very modern look, although they still do have that shark nose and batwing fairing look and appeal. You know, the bones of the bike still is very much what Harley-Davidson has always built. They have the sharper lines, the lighting, LED lighting that looks very modern. They did away with a lot of these little bullet turn signals and things like that with the LED lighting integrated into the fairing and everything. And so, just in casual conversation, I was talking to Mickey and Nick just about what their preference was in styling. I think we all have our conclusions, but we'll kind of save that for the end. I think Harley-Davidson has gotten a lot of criticism over the last couple decades about not making them, have a modern bike. And the mechanical side is one thing. And I think I can easily say mechanically these bikes are very modern, and Harley-Davidson has put a lot of things into these bikes like modern engines, traction control, and ABS, and lean sensitive adaptation to all those features as well. But I've been a huge advocate of always having that air-cooled V-twin motor because you get a character and a sound that everybody expects from Harley-Davidson. As soon as you go away from that, things happen. These bikes become less appealing. So we're not going to talk so much about the mechanical side as we are just kind of the styling side, because I personally feel like there are less very classically styled motorcycles on the floor nowadays. We talked about the Heritage. We talked about maybe the Road King a little bit, but what's your guys' initial reaction? What's your guys' thoughts in terms of moving forward with style choices with Harley-Davidson?
Yeah, I do think that the motor company is kind of torn between two worlds a little bit. And I think part of this is just the fact that like the baggers just saw a massive redesign. And since they make up such a significant part of both the overall sales of Harley-Davidson, but also just people's mind share of what Harley-Davidson represents, what they are, I think that means that we kind of have this maybe a slightly skewed perspective of what the styling currently is leaning towards, whether modern or classic. But I definitely agree that overall, it's a little bit more modern right now than it was when I first started working here. I don't think that that's necessarily a bad thing. I think you kind of have to follow trends. That's something that's really important to me. And I also think that some bikes are so timeless that they end up looking modern, even though they're a 35 or 40-year-old design in many regards in terms of their visuals, or at least what they are paying homage to. Like I don't look at the Lowrider S as a classically styled bike in many regards. Like it looks like a modern muscle cruiser to me, but the reality is that you sit it next to my dad's 85 FXR, and as much as that's a modified bike and has some modern touches to it, like to suggest that the lineage isn't there, or that the DNA isn't quite clear between those two models, I think I would just disagree with somebody if they thought that there wasn't a very strong link between those two models. So I think sometimes it's tough for us because the bikes that Harley has made are so timeless in many regards that they end up looking modern even when they are kind of classically styled, just because that's what they have always looked like. It's not really a throwback if your bikes have always looked like that, I think a good example of like a retro bike is kind of a lot of what like Triumph builds. Like there was a long period of time where Triumph wasn't building Bonnevilles, but now they're building Bonnevilles again. There was a long period of time when Kawasaki wasn't building the Z900 RS, which is like a cafe racer style bike, right?
Do you think they're doing that because classic style is coming back now? Or
I think so.
Why are they doing that? Is it a price point thing or?
I think that there's definitely like a market for people who they don't want a bike that looks like a race bike, They want kind of a traditionally styled classic motorcycle. And so I think that brands are recognizing that. The conundrum for Harley is that like they've always been so true to their styling. They've always been so true to their identity, to the point where like if they release a bike that looks different from what people are expecting, the comment section is just filled with, that's not a Harley-Davidson, that's not a Harley-Davidson, Suzuki can build whatever they want and no one's going to go in their comment section and be like, that's not a Suzuki. Suzuki. That's just not a conversation that anyone has with that brand, and that's because Suzuki's never really done a good job of having a very core brand identity in the way that Harley has. But it means that like every change that Harley makes, I think, is scrutinized in a much larger fashion, and there's a much higher chance or a much higher propensity for people to be like, I don't know if that's really a Harley-Davidson.
Everyone has this preset expectation of what a Harley should look like.
Yeah.
And as soon as Harley-Davidson deviates from that, all of a sudden you have a large group of people that are like,
And the designers and the engineers, all the way from Brad Richards, who you've been very fortunate, and I've been fortunate enough to talk to a number of times, but everyone too within the design team that I've talked to below him are extremely cognizant of that and very respectful of that. And so they are very much wanting to pay tribute to the brand, but also move it forward respectfully. Yeah. And that's just a tough challenge. And where you line up, I think, to kind of answer your original question, I think it very much depends on the model, I
agree as well.
Yeah, but I do agree that overall, I do think it's a little bit more lopsided right now than I would like. As I'll discuss maybe after Mickey gives his ideas. Yeah. I also have some of my own internal disagreements with the idea that it's a little too modern. Like I also kind of err on the side that it might still be a little too classic right now.
Really?
Yeah.
I don't know. We were talking about it, how the Heritage is obviously the one that jumps out. That's still like a classic looking bike. But then I was thinking about the Lowrider ST it's an RT. That is almost a carbon copy, and you put it on a modern platform with modern features, and that's an RT.
Totally.
It doesn't look like anything else to me.
Yeah, it's an 80s FXRT.
Yeah, 100%. If they put that tour pack on it, if they remade that tour pack, done. That should be the next icon for sure.
They should.
I don't know. I like modernity. Like, I like safety features. The whole suite of safety features, like, we're not going to talk about the mechanical stuff, but I like all that modern improvement.
I think we can all agree that the narrative that sometimes the anti-Harley-Davidson people have, that Harley-Davidson's technology mechanically isn't modern, I think that's a total farce and totally incorrect. I think we can all agree, especially with the Rev Max platform. Like, if you don't want the air-cooled motor, if you think that that's still ancient technology, okay, then get a Rev Max on a Sportster or a Pan America. I think we can all agree that Harley-Davidson is up to snuff, at least 90-95%, as much technology as like the guys that are notorious for it, like maybe KTM or something like that. So that's no longer an issue. But yeah, we're talking more styling.
I think that's a credit to the design team, because Brad has talked about that is like part of the challenge is hiding all that stuff.
Totally.
And the Rev Max bikes don't really hide it quite as well as the M8 bikes. The M8 bikes look very simple. Mm-hmm. Even though they have all the technology in them. And that stuff is crammed in there. Like the new Softails underneath the seat, like that is crammed in there. And they're hiding everything. Like you don't really see wires or hoses or anything like that. Like you're looking at powertrain. And, I think that's what we want out of a Harley-Davidson. Like we want to see that air-cooled V-twin motor.
Totally. Yeah. If you have all that crap all over it, it kills the look for people. And honestly, I think aesthetics and quality fit and finish is far more important than technology is. As much as people gripe about technology and Harley-Davidson, yesterday's tech at today's prices, I've read that a comment a million times. As much as people say that, great. That's great. I don't care, to a certain extent. Yeah. But these motors, they're putting out good power now.
Yeah.
Well, and the funny thing, too, is that, like, if you actually look at the technology that's in I know we're supposed to be talking more about styling, but just this is something that I think triggers all of us.
Ahead.
So if leave a comment in the comment section talking about technology and how Harleys don't have any, and I'll be there arguing with you.
Yeah.
But no, I think that what bothers me is that there's not a lot of thought that's put into these comments, because first of all, just like certain stat lines, there are very few motorcycles, for example, just in production in general, that have variable valve timing. It's just not a common technology, right?
True.
And the bikes that do have it tend to advertise it, and their implementation is not even always necessarily as good as what Harley-Davidson is, because just having that box of variable valve timing doesn't mean that it's going to be as dynamic as how it is implemented on, for example, the Pan Am. For a long time, BMW advertised their shift cam technology. I'm not trying to downplay what it is. It's a cool piece of technology, but you could very much feel that bike coming on cam when we test rode that bike back when the Pan Am was launching, because essentially it was just two cam profiles. And the Pan Am's variable valve timing offered almost infinite adjustability over 40 degrees, which meant that like there was never a sensation of it coming on cam. Like it's a peakier motor, you have to rev it out more, but it's never like I hit this RPM and now I have a new cam profile. Like that's not how that variable valve timing works. And everyone had to play catch up for adaptive ride height. But even in the baggers, when it comes to the CVOs with their variable valve timing, with knock sensors and all sorts of stuff that Harley's implemented, if you look at the Milwaukee 8, what you see is a very deliberate engine. Probably one of the weirdest engines currently being produced by any large-scale manufacturer. And I mean that in a really positive way, right? Name another manufacturer that's making a single cam pushrod motor with 4 valves. Right, this is a deliberate choice. It's not because We don't have the technology to make a water-cooled bike from a company that made the V-Rod 20 years ago. Everything about the M8 is an exercise of what can we improve to give people a better user experience without changing the character, because there's an acknowledgement that the character, the beauty, right, of that motor is actually a huge part to the overall enjoyment, right? You know, having 10 extra horsepower just because you decide to liquid cool the motor, it doesn't actually add that much enjoyment to the experience. Rolls-Royce isn't going to slap 4 turbos on their motor and put a lumpy cam in there and get you 800 horsepower and ruin the noise and vibrations of that engine just so that they can say that they have more horsepower than someone else, right? The motor needs to have adequate power. It needs to deliver the personality that suits the vehicle. And so Harley has very deliberately touched the things that they can on their motors while not touching the things that are crucial to the experience, like the 45-degree angle, the single pin crankshafts that give you that traditional idle, the air-cooled nature of the bike that gives you the visual, aesthetical beauty of the motor and the simplicity externally. Those are all very deliberate choices. And so when you're in the comment section going like, oh, it's air-cooled, you know, or 100 horsepower out of 1,800 cc's, what is this? It's like, you've missed the entire point. And that's fine. Like, it's not for everybody, but it's just like, you clearly are kind of interested, but unwilling to learn or unwilling to just think about things critically.
It's a very ignorant comment. Someone that comes from a place of zero understanding about the product. Absolutely. So, and I think you covered the whole mechanical conundrum very, very well that Harley-Davidson has to deal with. And honestly, I think the Milwaukee 8 is super underappreciated because it straddles that line perfectly, in my opinion. It still gives the Harley-Davidson enthusiast that wants all of those things that we mentioned from a bike, but also upgradability, the modern refinement of that motor compared to like the twin cam motor. It's delivered on all those things. But, you know, moving back to style here. So I really personally think that Harley-Davidson, depending on what model we're looking at, I think can kind of make a choice whether they go modern or real classic. I personally would like to see the Road King go classic again. You know, we've had the Road King special without the standard for, what has it been, 2 or 3 years now. I would love to see that bike go classic again. And, you know, there was a time there where the specials were outselling the standards, and the whole blacked out hot rod bagger was really, really on trend. You know, when the street glides and the road glides started adopting all these lowered stretch bags, less auxiliary lighting and things like that, I see more of a hunger from customers towards like some of this classic stuff. I see how some of these builders, especially in certain cultural groups, building, like a popular one around here is the Viclo. We always talk about, you know, that Hispanic, you know, lowrider look, you know. And so the Road King is one that I see that would be nice to go classic again, you know, white walls, spoke wheels, maybe like some higher bars on it, things like that. But I do agree with you as well, Mickey, that some of these bikes like the lowrider ST, having its roots that could be traced back to like the FXR days that Nick mentioned, it does that very well with a very cool like modern twist to it. I think the baggers were also one that, I like the direction they went with the baggers. I think the road glide looks great. I think the street glide looks really, really good. But I think my main point I want to make is that Harley-Davidson needs to bring some of the classic appeal back. I think the Sportsters, talked about this in a podcast before, I think it was me and Nick, Harley took a huge gamble when they redesigned the Sportster line and went to the Rev Max. It's a faster bike. It's a more mechanically sound bike. It's a better ride comfort, but you don't have the appeal that classic air-cooled Evo had. And I think the Sportster is a classic play bike. You have to play on the classic appeal of a Harley-Davidson, that look, sound, and feel. So I'd like to see something change there as well. I just think that Harley needs to make a classic play on the Sportster line.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I notice a lot is that when people come in asking for the Nightster, it's because it's the sub $10,000 bike.
It's a price point bike.
It's a price point bike. It's an entry-level bike. When most people, I would say probably 80%, 8 out of 10 people, if they're looking for a traditional Sportster like an Iron, they just think they're rad. Like, it's a cool-looking Harley-Davidson. And I think that's one of the biggest differences between them. Because, on paper, obviously the Nightster outperforms any of the old Sportsters, the Evo Sportsters.
By a lot.
Yeah.
But not from a style perspective.
Yep, and a lot of these guys that are getting into the Harley world, they want to do it because they want to customize their bike.
Absolutely.
They want to go on YouTube and look at Blockhead's videos and get a tank lift and an ignition relocation.
How many times has somebody opened up their phone and scrolled for a photo and showed you like a super modified Sportster that's got like knobby tires on it or something just way off the wall, you know?
It's also not a match in the fit and finish department. You know, it's a substantially better made and looking bike than most bikes on the road. Like, I'm not trying to say it has bad fit and finish, but I think that you go from something like the air-cooled Sporties, which had everything on them be metal. And I think when Harley prioritized weight, they told themselves, hey, well, we can use a little bit more plastic here and there. I mean, the fenders are still metal. The airbox, right, which doesn't need to be metal because it's just a covering because the gas tank's underneath the seat, that's metal, right? So it's not like they didn't use high quality stuff. In some areas, they spent more money, right? So it's got Brembo brakes as opposed to the old Nissans, which I'm sure that, who knows if it's actually a performance increase, but it's definitely more expensive, right, to pay for that. Ultimately, I think that you guys are 100% right. The Sportster was a bike that was sold because guys looked at it and they're like, that looks really, really cool. They fired it up and like, that sounds really, really cool,
that's
right?
A Harley. That's a Harley.
And then they looked on Instagram and they're like, dude, and there's all these cool things that people are doing to it, right? And then they looked at the price tag and they're like, that's a pretty cool price tag too, actually. It was a great trifecta of reasons for someone to buy it. Looked cool, sounded cool, and people hopped on it. Now, when they hopped on it and they tried to ride it long distance, they found out it had a 5-speed and 45 horsepower. Then they were back in the dealership buying a Lowrider S or a Street Bob or something pretty quickly if they wanted to do a lot of miles, especially if they weren't just an around town kind of guy. And that's where the new Sportster crushes the old Sportster. Like, I have no qualms being like, oh, you want to commute, you want to do some light trips on it, as long as you're willing, not a giant guy, and you're comfortable on the bike. Like, it's got a 6-speed, which compared to its competition is a nice upgrade because a lot of them still have 5 speeds. 90 horsepower. I mean, you're not going to get tired of that. It's power to weight. It's one of the fastest bikes we make. It's a really, really good bike, but it's not how I would have personally hoped that they would have styled it. I think also too, like, the Sportster has such a history, and like you said, such a classically styled bike that it can kind of, resting on its laurels is kind of a weird way to phrase it, right? But it has credibility baked into it. Yep. I think by launching the Nightster and the Nightster Special with the 975 and with nicely equipped stuff, but not like the headline front cover of your website kind of stuff. If they had stuck the 1250 and 150 horsepower and big Brembos, and if they'd really gone out and been like, we're going to make something that gives everything else in the Sportster lineup credibility. And maybe they would argue that the Sportster S is that, and I think the Sportster S is a cool bike, but it's just a niche. It's a niche product.
It's a rocket.
It's a rocket, but sure. It's a niche product, right? It's a fat tire, relatively small cruiser with a lot of horsepower. It's a cool bike. I'm glad it exists, but it's not.
It's like a Tron or anime bike or something like that.
Yeah. But it's also not a traditionally styled bike, so it has a lot of things that a traditional Harley buyer is going to have to like look through to really start to appreciate, right? I think that having something that lends credibility and validity to the rest of the lineup would have been better than launching like the entry level thing. Because I think that the Nightster S and the Nightster are trying to like carve out this space for them, and they're both new in terms of their styling, and they're new in terms of their mechanical stuff. They're new in terms of their parts catalog, and it's just like an uphill battle for any bike like that doesn't just justify its own existence by just being the most badass thing. So I kind of wish that they had just built the most badass thing based upon what's trending.
Just say the Bronx. That's where you're going with this.
No, I mean, actually, no. I feel like the Bronx was cool and is cool, and I hope that they build it. And I think it would have been marginally better performer than something like the Sportster S sales wise. But I don't think it's the solution. Again, it's going to pull in other people from other brands. But like, if you wanted Harley buyers to take a serious look at the new Sportster platform, you got to do something that forces their attention, that makes them look at it, right? And I don't think that the Sportster S does that, because I think that if a guy who likes the Lowrider S looks at the Sportster S, he goes, well, I mean, it's cool motor, it's fast. I hope they put it in something I want. And then
a lot of people want the RevMax platform in the cruisers.
And then they look at or they say that. I don't know if they actually do that.
I don't know if they really do, but I hear that a lot. Like, they ship with the RevMax in a bagger.
I've seen that comment several times, and I'm just like, do you really? I don't think so, man.
Yeah. Like, where I think they fall short is style. At the end of the day, they don't pull you in for style, because like the Iron Sportsters or the Evo Sportsters, they pull you in with style, and then you're like, okay, well, maybe I want a little bit more as far as power, fuel capacity, transmission, So the other bikes, they have all that, but they lack the style.
Yeah. And so there's nothing in that range that forces you to respect it. And I think it's both stylistically a problem, but it's mechanically a problem. It's just a holistic problem, right? Because if they looked a certain way, then you'd have to respect them. It's just a very traditionally styled Harley, but now it's a Sportster with double the horsepower. If it looked exactly like the old Sportster, but it had double the horsepower and a 6-speed, we'd be selling those all day, right?
Game over, yeah.
If it looks like an FXR and it makes 150 horsepower and it's got electronic suspension or even just fully adjustable suspension and Brembos and all this kind of stuff, your buddy on the Lowrider S can't make fun of you, because you're going to spank him. And your bike looks just as good, minus the traditionally looking styled motor, But outside of that, what does he really have to say? And they didn't build that kind of bike. And I think that's a mistake. I think you need to do one or the other. Traditionally style it, or just make it where people have to respect it. There are people that don't like the Pan Am, but pretty much everyone respects the Pan Am. And they might say it's not for me, but they don't go, why did Harley build that?
Yeah.
Because they can't say that.
Yeah.
It's too good of a bike.
I mean, really, it's the Cruiser lineup that's going to get any more classic stuff in it, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, I've always...
You mentioned the Road King, which I agree with.
Yeah, and I've been pretty vocal in the last 10 years about bringing Springer back. I think a Springer play and the Softail lineup would be an absolute home run hit for Harley-Davidson.
Banger bike.
And you can't get any more classic Harley-Davidson than putting a Springer on it. And no other manufacturer can really do that, you know? So that's one that I've been pushing for a really long time now. And I think that would go... I mean, Springers, whenever we get a Springer that rolls in here, like a pre-owned or something like that, we're like, we don't care how old it is, just give us that bike, because they're going to sell really
Even when they're in the parking lot, everybody, all of us that see bikes all day, every day,
such a beautiful play on classic appeal. Yeah, so that would be one that I think is great. But real quick comment on everything you said, Nick. You unloaded a lot, which was very well said. I think at the end of the day, if I'm going to get on a bike and ride to Nevada or something like that, I'm going to get the Nightster before an air-cooled Evo like 883 10 times out of 10. But it's interesting, when the Nightster was first launched, they made this big play on customization. They called it the instrument of something. I can't remember, but it was
self-expression or something.
Yeah, an instrument of expression or something like that. And they had all these really cool builders build these bikes.
Yeah.
I can't think of a single time where a guy has come to our shop and been like, hey guys, I want to do this cool build on a Nightster. Let's do this, 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 and this. And I get it. It's a lower price point bike, so you're not really attracting the customer that has a lot of extra disposable income to spend on customization. But we did quite a bit of customization on the air-cooled Evo stuff, especially if you go back, 10 years when they were super, super hot. And so, yeah, that's just one more example of people expect a certain level of customization, character, and look out of a Harley-Davidson. And if you don't have those core elements, I don't care how fast it is, how many gallons of gas it has, how many gizmos and gadgets, electronics it has, Harley buyers aren't going to want it. And that's not saying that they've gone the wrong direction, because I feel like the performance crowd has gotten a lot more prevalent in the Harley-Davidson space. Performance bagger was something that we were hoping for. Like if you go back 10 years ago, we were all hoping for a performance bagger. We had the ST, we had the CVO Road Glide ST. Now we have the RR, and then the King of the Baggers came into play now. And I think just that whole movement has been a huge success from Harley-Davidson, and identifying that performance play in the Harley-Davidson world. That V-twin performance has been extremely popular. I think Harley-Davidson has recognized that, capitalized on it, and now we have some really cool bikes like Lowrider S, Lowrider ST, and the Road Glides that I mentioned, which has been great. And I think that that's been phenomenal. And so going back to what Nick said earlier, depending on what model you're looking at, I think it can have its own identity in terms of, okay, this is a performance bike that has some of its roots based out of the FXR or whatever. But then there are certain models that I think don't have to be performance at all, like the Springer, for example, or maybe the Heritage. I think the Heritage is a good bike, but I think we need to refresh it. Let's put a Springer front end on it, for example.
Absolutely.
And the Sportster is another one. Are there any standout bikes in your guys' opinion that you think Harley did a great job in moving it in a modern direction? Or are there bikes that you can think of right away that maybe need to be more classic? Or is there a bike that you think Harley-Davidson needs to come out with that needs to be like a classic play?
I think they could rotate Softail models more. We have the breakout back. They phased it out, phased it back in. I think that could phase back out. I think a lot of people would rather have a deluxe in the lineup, or trade the breakout for a deluxe. I thought the Slim was a great bike. You had a Slim.
Yeah.
Very classic looking bike. Didn't they use the Slim in the Indiana Jones movie with Shia LaBeouf? And
I think
they
so.
acted like it was like an old.
I know they did it in a Marvel, like a Captain
Captain
America movie.
America.
Oh, is it Captain America?
He rides Slims.
That's what it is.
Usually.
Yeah.
Because it's just that perfect post-war bike. Yeah, I mean, I agree with. I think that there isn't a big drawback. I mean, I don't know what impact it has on the books, but between kind of having models kind of pop in and out, where you kind of know it's going to come back at some point, but you don't know exactly when, almost like the Disney Volt or something of VHS tapes.
Please don't compare Harley to Disney.
Outside of business model, right? Because they're pretty evil and pretty successful, right? Maybe we should adapt some of that, but
maybe.
But yeah, you could pull out, and they're kind of doing that with Icons. So I mean, maybe they are kind of testing the waters with that.
Great play. The Icons is a great play.
Yeah,
I think bringing back that classic stuff.
Yeah, no, and it definitely is, I think, really effective at one, getting people to come out and buy 2,000 of a certain type of bike, right? it lends to, I mean, obviously it tags on the heritage. It lends itself well to a play with exclusivity, all sorts of stuff. But I would love to see the deluxe come back. And I want them to be less afraid too of maybe doing lower volume individual models that are just very similar to one another, but just offer some stylistic tweaks that hit certain trends pretty well. You know, that's something like we were talking about.
Sounds like an icon.
Yeah, but even then, that like just maybe like, you know, they killed off the deluxe because they thought it just was too close to the heritage, right? And that in other parts of the country, the heritage does better than the deluxe. But like, I can't imagine them being produced alongside being dramatically more expensive because there's so much overlap between those two models. And if you wanted to distinguish them a little bit more, like you could even do a heritage that is still technically a heritage, but has a 21 inch and a white wall, you know, or excuse me, a 19 inch in the front and a white wall, right? And, you know, they seem to be going away from that direction. You know, it's like now not only do we not have the deluxe, you can't even get the heritage in chrome, or at least not all chromed out, right? And I think that's kind of the wrong direction for that model, both in terms of it reduces the amount of truly classic models that we have, because I think people really do associate chrome with a classic aesthetic.
Yeah, without chrome, it's not classic.
And you know, what Brad said to me in our interview was that they wanted to make it kind of a little bit of both. That way, if you had a guy that wanted all chrome, they could easily swap out the exhaust and make it all chrome. Or if you wanted to go all black, you can swap out, I guess, a lot of the covers, the cam cover and the rocker box covers, which would be kind of pricey. But yeah, I think when you try to do everything at once, you don't do any one good thing good.
Yeah, so, and you know, I would hate to be having to make those kinds of decisions, because I'm sure someone was like, well, we don't want to make both, or we're not doing the volume on the heritage anymore to justify doing both options. Yeah. So, you know, how do we keep the heritage but make it more successful? And it's tough. I don't know exactly what that is, you know. And you know, speaking of icons and classically styled bikes and the heritage, the least popular, we still sold every one that we got, and it wasn't like some problem bike, but the Icon Heritage was the least successful. The Hydroglide was the least successful icon for us at our dealership. Now, maybe that's not true at every dealership, but that's one of the most classically styled bikes that Harley-Davidson has produced in the last probably 10 years, aesthetically, very true to its original, you know, form, and it did not sell nearly as well as the other icons. You know, we still sold them, but it wasn't like the
Diablo,
or even
it was not an El Diablo,
yeah, or even the
Highway King,
even the Highway Kings. You know, and the Highway Kings were a little bit more modern in some ways. I feel like aesthetically, and not hugely, but like, and it helps that they were baggers and road kings. I think a little bit.
Yeah, I mean the model plays a big part of, you know, how popular it's
the Lowrider, that was the first year of the Lowrider ST, right? The El Diablo in 22.
Yeah.
You know, Nick, you mentioned finish of the heritage, and maybe them scrapping the two different options from the factory being attributed to, you know, lower volume in sales. You know, one of the bikes that have very high volume sales was the Lowrider ST, and this year they allowed the consumer to choose, okay, you want chrome or you want black. And the chrome this year with that 80s wing on the side of the tank, like that was a rad classic play on that bike. We gush about the Lowrider ST so much because it's just so many things to so many people. I'm just a huge fan of that bike. And, you know, depending on the paint scheme and the engine trim, you really can have a very classic play, or you can have that more modern, you know, blacked out look, among all the other things that the Lowrider ST does, you know, with the fairing that we mentioned earlier. But yeah, to your point, Nick, I think it's tough for them to be like, okay, well, what bike do we offer multiple trims on? And how do we still keep all these decisions somewhat manageable by dealerships that are trying to order these bikes and not have so much inventory, you know, just based on trying to have one of every motorcycle, you know?
And what's good in their specific market, you know, because it's not uniform across the country.
Yeah. Because ideally, I'd like the same thing too, you know? I'd like to have more options with each model. Like, I would like to have multiple trim options on every model if we could, you know? There's a lot of people that want blacked out Fat Boys, blacked out breakouts. They want that, like, super blacked out, like, lowrider, airbag, fat rear tire look, you know? Which would be great, but it's probably not economically feasible for them to do that.
Yeah. I don't know too. I think maybe sometimes they worry that if they charge as much as they need to charge for certain options, that it'll hurt sales too much, and then they just won't sell that unit. But I'm just not sure that's entirely true. Like I guess the longer we've been doing this, the more that I just had over and over reaffirmed that people will pay for what it is that they want. You know, that when you're selling Harleys, these are aspirational bikes for most of our customers. As they've waited a long time, they've saved a lot of money, and they want to get what they want to get. when the Electric Glide Standard was sitting next to the Street Glide Special, the $10,000 price point difference just didn't impact their decision. And we sold Street Glide Specials until the 2024 updates, and the Electric Glide Standard was killed after 2 years. So I don't know where everybody was in the comment section screaming for, a cheap bagger, and they would buy a cheap bagger if Harley built one, but they didn't. They didn't come out. And the customers,
$19,999. You had under $20,000 bagger.
Yeah.
Yep.
And that's what everybody screamed for, and nobody bought it.
Yep. But everybody wanted the stereo. They wanted the stretch bags.
Yeah, and they wanted it blacked out, and they were willing to pay for it.
They wanted that cool factor.
Yeah,
and Street Glide had the cool factor. Electric Glide did not have the cool factor.
So if the motor company has to charge $2,000 for chrome on the Road King Special so that they can offer both for that to make sense, then do that, in my opinion. Give people the choice, but charge what needs to be charged for it to be profitable. But I think that you shouldn't be afraid to build what a lot of people think is cool. People will spend money on what they think is cool. Build a cool product, and people will typically buy it. Like the Lowrider ST is the most expensive softail in the lineup. Outsells everything else. 100%. It's the most expensive softail in the lineup. And I will sell 10 of those next month for every Street Bob I sell.
Yep.
Right. I will sell blacked out Road Glides at a ratio of like 10-1 to Nightsters.
It's not the price point. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think back to the thing you were talking about, trend, which we talked about earlier, which is the more I think about it, the more I agree with you that it's like if Harley could be faster picking up on the trends, maybe trend is kind of a negative word, but more so like
what people want,
what the customer actually wants,
want.
you know? And one of the things that in recent times is the T-Sport, the club style stuff, and having Harley come out with something like that was from the factory. And we were talking about that earlier. Like all this stuff is in the P&A catalog. And
they made the T-Sport for 3 years. Yeah. I did a Dyna video a little while ago, the best Dynas.
I watched it. Yeah.
Thanks, man. Like and subscribe. That has been such a huge influential cultural play in what was built in the 2007s, 8s, 9s when the club style bike got popular. Yeah. Harley built it for 3 years. And we have this entire like aesthetic and culture around these bikes. If Harley brought that back, I think it would do really, really good. But then where does that put the ST? I think it's
what year was that?
It was like 2002, 3, and 4, or 3, 4, and 5, right around there.
And we still have. I just saw on Reddit in the Harley subgroup that, hey, what fairing should I put on here? And everybody's like, Road Warrior, Road Warrior, T-Sport, T-Sport, and like that's still prevalent today. And, Harley has a quarter fairing in the catalog. And
aren't T-Sports appreciating in value right now? Like, I think I heard some of them going for stupid money. I'm like, what's happening?
We got a call. Somebody was trying to sell theirs and they wanted a very high number for it. We weren't in the market at that number. And then the next day they let us know, it sold for that number.
I'm not surprised. It's
it's Harley's bike. You're just reusing your motorcycle, and that's what's so great about Harley. They have all these historical motorcycles they have to pull from, and you just kind of watch what people are doing. Nick, you mentioned Street Bob as well, and I think Street Bob is important because Street Bob is definitely a classic play, right? I mean, that's a bobber. Back post World War II when guys were chopping fenders and stuff off their bike. That was kind of the origination of the bobber. Harley-Davidson, they've had it since 2006, so it's been around for a long time. I think we need a refresh on that bike. Maybe a whole new model, but I like the classic play. And I don't know what that would be exactly. Maybe more of a chopper-esque. I think the whole chopper scene is just blowing up right now. You got Born Free. You got these guys that, are riding across the country on their old school choppers and stuff. And I get that that's a different crowd, and that's not really the crowd that buys new bikes. But there's a lot of guys that want that look. They want that image, but they're not mechanics. They don't want to be a part-time mechanic. They want to get on a bike and put gas in it and go. So maybe something more chopper-esque out of the Street Bob. I don't know. What do you guys think about the Street Bob?
I get what you're saying because as time has gone on, before it was like when you were into choppers, we kind of like looked down on Evo sporty chops, and it was like, no, you got to get a shovel head or older. And now like the Big Twin Evo is the new shovel head because enough time has gone by that the Big Twin Evo, that's an old motor now, so there's still
when you can still kind of find them at a reasonable price.
You can still find parts, you can still work on them.
We're talking about the built not bought guys.
Yeah, exactly.
Chopping the fender on a $20,000 bike or something too.
Yeah.
And there's the problem too is that like choppers are a tough market to hit in my opinion, kind of just because there's like a credibility component to not having a new one.
Yep.
Like there's an expectation. Like if your bike doesn't break down on the way to Sturgis, it's a problem. People are gonna be like, "You're not real."
Too reliable.
Exactly,
It's
right.
not leaking oil.
But I do think that it was a interesting bike, in my opinion, to not put a teardrop tank on originally, just because I feel like either a teardrop and or like a peanut style tank is so crucial to the Harley-Davidson chopper aesthetic. I think it's tough to hit that market on a brand new bike, but the other brands are doing bobbers, but maybe a slightly smaller fender. I know it already kind of has a stubby fender, but it's a little bit longer than some of the other brands I've seen. There's an expectation that you're going to chop your chopper. It has to have some sort of modification for it to be that kind of bike. Yeah. But I think that something that you touched on, Mickey, that that we had talked about earlier, is just kind of an agility. Like I think that I've seen from other brands sometimes like a quick turnaround on, especially like KTM. It's like, I feel like they got a new model every 5 seconds. Now they did almost go bankrupt, so maybe we shouldn't be copying them too much.
And their reliability is horrible.
Yeah, and they had to get bought out by an Indian company. So maybe don't copy those aspects, or maybe this is just not possible if you're responsibly running your business, which they clearly, if they clearly weren't. So I don't know, But I do think that there's something up to that agility, and it's not new, right? And I get that there's more stuff they have to comply with, and it's harder to be agile in this day and age. So I don't mean this in like a critical way, but I do think that should be a priority or an emphasis put on trying to get back to that to some degree if possible, because correct me if I'm wrong, but Willie G was famous for just going to bike shows and being like, that's really cool. We should do something like that, like a factory custom kind of thing.
Yeah, I think so. And I wasn't in the business back then, like in the 80s and 90s like I am now. But I do think that even in the early 2000s, when I did start to get involved in this business, we have a lot more agility now than we did back in the day, I think, from a manufacturing standpoint. But I think it's about recognizing it. I think it's your point, Nick. Like, we need to recognize what's hot, more importantly, what's up and coming, and then start developing, before it really peaks.
Yeah,
because the name of the game is to make a product that your customer wants. Mm-hmm. That's the name of the game.
Yeah, for pretty much every business.
And if your customers all want this, then you need to have the agility to be able to pivot and move and be able to produce that product.
Yeah. I think sometimes marketing and engineering don't necessarily have the same perception of things. Marketing goes, hey, look, Born Free is really successful. We should be associated with that. But I need engineering to go, Born Free is really successful. We need to build that.
Correct.
There's performance baggers are really successful. Let's get our name, out there in front of the racing public. No, we need to build that and sell that. The value of Born Free, the value of Moto America, the value of whatever it is that you're looking at that is what you might think of as advertising, in my opinion, it's more about knowing, hey, this is what the people want. This is what they're watching. This is what they're riding to. This is what they're participating in. Let's build the products that are associated with that better than anyone else.
Yeah. I think we'll end here, guys, with all of our final thoughts. I'll start with my final thoughts. I think at the end of the day, it's tough for Harley-Davidson because they've built their brand and legacy on classic motorcycles, but I think they've done a very good job at bringing out this performance age or era of motorcycles in the Lowrider ST, the Lowrider S, the Road Glide ST. Right now it's just the CVO Road Glide ST, and then even the RR. I think that's great, and I think that Harley-Davidson has really done a good job at having their performance V-twin line, but I think at the same time, Harley-Davidson has to be very careful about not forgetting about their classic roots, and I think that there's some bikes that really could do very, very well right now if they play on that classic appeal. The bikes I mentioned, the bikes that you guys talked about, I see that as a play right now. I think we've got the V-twin performance pretty well covered with a lot of the bikes that we have in the lineup right now, which Harley's done a fantastic job. But we need a refresh on some of these classic things. Road King, Street Bob, if we can bring a Springer back, great. Sportsters. Yeah, I just think that some of these bikes are classic bikes that if we don't really focus in on what has made them popular in the past and kind of amplify that, maybe tweak it a little bit, then I think HD is missing a big opportunity. It's kind of a bike and model specific thing, right? It's not just a blanket, hey, everything's got to be classic, or everything's got to be more modern. I think it's all dictated by the model, because every model is going to attract a different type of consumer. Nothing wrong with Harley-Davidson getting as many consumers as possible, right? They've done it with the Pan America and some other bikes recently. So
yeah, I agree with you. I think it's more so like, I like the idea of businesses trying to be in touch with their customer and trying to offer a product that their customer really wants. And I think that's all any of us want. So we might all have a different opinion on what the lineup should look like, how many Softail models there should be. You know, there's 6 right now, and should we delete 1 or 2, or should they have, you know, extreme drastic changes or just minor changes of colorways? And I think what it really comes down to is that there's enough variety within the lineup. Like, they can do so many different things with the platforms that they have. Like, you just take the Softail chassis and you take the bagger chassis, and I think some of the things they pull up for the icons, it's the first time I heard about it. Oh, I wasn't familiar with the Grey Ghost. Like, I wasn't into Harleys in 1991. I wasn't really into Fat Boys, you know? So I learned about the Grey Ghost when the new Grey Ghost came out. And I think if they're listening to their customer base and they're pulling on those things, I think it's going to be good for business. And I think that means that the customer is getting what they want and they're willing to pay for it.
I think that ultimately the bike needs to dictate the styling. And I think that from a more holistic view of Harley, I want to see Harley be less concerned with hitting any particular price point and more concerned with just delivering bikes that aesthetically hit what people want and do and perform the way people are going to expect. And if that's on a deluxe, right, then I don't want to see a 16-inch or a 15-inch front wheel. I want to see a 19-inch front wheel, and I want to see white walls, and I want to see chrome lowers. And if that means you have to charge an extra $2,000 or whatever to achieve that, cool, right? And if you know you're not going to sell nearly as many of those as Heritage, so you have to charge a little bit more, fine. But we have customers that come in, and we've modified a Heritage to have white walls. We've put bars on it, something that Harley I know can't do, right? We've taken the bags off, and between the labor and everything, these bikes they're more expensive than what Harley would be able to do it. And we used to have one on the floor every single time, and people would be like, "Oh, this bike's still here." It's like, no, we've sold 2 from the last time you've come in. We just keep building them every time because it sells. People want it. It's like, if Harley's not going to build the model, then fine, we'll build the model. But we can't do that for everything. If you give us a chrome Heritage, yeah, we can build a Lux, but we can't build other things based upon that. And so I really want Harley to know, like, to lean into it, right? If this is this bike, right, build it cool and how people want and how you see it on Instagram, as close as you can. Obviously, you can't put fishtails without cats on it or whatever. I understand the limitations, but get it as close as you can and build that. And don't be afraid to do that, because I think that sometimes they get a little bit nervous. And but every time they do that, every time they build something that's really bitchin' and cool like that, like,
you know, Nick, we've actually had a discussion when we did our pricing podcast on Harley-Davidson. I think we came to somewhat of the same conclusion that I think you're making right now, and that is, if you build the bikes that people just can't resist, it doesn't matter if they're $1,000 or $2,000 or $3,000 more. If you build the bikes that people just have to have, they will pay the money. And I'm not saying, okay, let's price ourselves, crazy, but for as many comments as there are on the internet right now about how Harley-Davidson has gotten out of control with pricing, they haven't really. I have records of 60 years of sales at our dealership and how much, we've charged people for these bikes. And when you take into account inflation, the prices really haven't gone up.
No.
So, and the bikes that continue to sell, we've made this point before, the bikes that continue to sell are the really popular bikes that people just strikes that chord with people, and they got to have it.
Yeah.
So I agree 100% with you, Nick.
Yeah. So I just hope the motor company looks at, like, their models and they go, which are our problem children? And then they go, which one do we wish sold more? And then looked at the price tag for those and saw that none of those are your most expensive bikes. Right. None of those are your most expensive bikes.
Yeah. I still do think they need to have a tiered pricing. They still do need to have around a $10,000 motorcycle.
Oh, and I totally agree with that. But like you said, it needs to be classically styled. It needs to hit the right points. It's not, don't hit the price point, but not give people what they want.
Exactly.
If you can't give people what they want, it doesn't matter what the price point is.
The price is like the second or third priority.
Exactly. So that's my take, Classically styled if it needs to be classically styled, but don't be afraid of building stuff like the Pan Am too. Just build it right, make it cool. And try to be competitive with your competition if you even have any. Kudos if you can get into markets that you have no competition too, because that Harley there's a lot of models they have that they just don't really have any honest competition, in my opinion. And those are great bikes usually.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, guys. Appreciate all your input. Yeah, it was good sitting down with you guys. And let me know what your guys' thoughts are as well. Are there certain bikes that you feel like Harley-Davidson has gone too modern in their styling, or do you think that they need more classic bikes? Let me know what your guys' thoughts are. I think Harley-Davidson's pretty good right now, like I've mentioned, but let us know what you guys think. As always, thanks again for watching. If you have any comments or questions, feel free to leave them in the comment section below. If you're looking for a new or used Harley-Davidson in Southern California, make sure you hit us up here at Laidlaw's Harley-Davidson. See you guys on the next one. Later.